Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this entry, so to speak, Simply Reports training workshop. I'm Mike. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Buckle Systems Administrator. I handle all the Polaris-related matters, reporting, etc., etc. And I will be here going over everybody's favorite reporting module, Simply Reports, and hopefully making it less intimidating to those of you who see all the options and get startled. So, first off, what is Simply Reports? So first off, the thing many people say is that it's not very simple, and I would point out it's not Simple Reports. It is, in fact, Simply Reports. It does one thing. It lets you target properties of the items and patrons and all those records that are in our database and spit out columns into spreadsheets and feed you data. It's simply that. Not simple, but it's pretty simple. It'll be simple by the end of this training session, hopefully. Let's see. I'm just going to pull up my screen here. Behind me. This is Simply Reports if you have not seen it already. I'm going to highlight how to get into it. And then I'm going to give like a brief overview of just, the Polaris world in general. So here in Buckles, and this is very basic, I know most of you already know this, but here in Buckles, we use Polaris as our sort of computing system for circulation and everything else. Polaris used to be owned by a company called Polaris, and then was bought by a company called Innovative, which was then bought by a company called ProQuest, as you can see behind me here. In fact, let me get rid of my face. You don't really need to look at me, do you? And so Polaris is our ILS. And I like to always teach people because some people hear ILS all the time, and some of the newer Circ staff just don't know what it is. So an ILS is an integrated library system. That's the terminology for the cataloging and computing and transactional software that libraries utilize. We have Polaris. Other libraries have Sierra, Evergreen, yada, yada, yada. But back to the topic at hand. Simply Reports. I'm actually going to log out just to show you what the login screen looks like. So now there's two ways to access Simply Reports. You can simply type in simplyreports.buckles.org/simplyreports. But if you go to My Buckles and you are logged in, you have access to the quick links, and you will find a link to Simply Reports right there. The sign-in is the same sign-in you would use to access Leap or the other reporting modules, which we'll go over real quick as well. I'm just going to monopolize Tenafly here, just so I'm logged in as an actual library, so you can see what that looks like without getting confused with anything else. The password is the same as well. Now, Simply Reports is a reporting module that was made by the people who made Polaris to feed data to staff. It's a very customized product from Innovative, and it has its limitations because it's not the only thing we have for reporting in Buckles world. In fact, if we go back over to My Buckles quick links, you'll see we also have regular reports, which you may be familiar with from where you get your Purple report or your hold statistics. Those are very different from Simply Reports in the sense that Simply Reports, you're making the report yourself. It's less powerful in some regards because you can't customize as much, but, well, actually, you can customize it a lot, But the Buckles custom reports are made by staff at the Buckles office and are specifically geared for sort of spoon-feeding you the data a bit more. And there's certain things that I'll explain in a little bit that you can't do in SimplyReports that you do need something like a Buckles custom report for. A quick example would be SimplyReports is one of its strong suits is not transactions between specific dates, like month to month. I'll elaborate a bit more on this in a while. And lastly, one other source of statistics and data that we also have in Buckles World is our statistics page, which we have here. And these are completely spoon-fed because there are monthly and yearly and so forth statistics that are general circ numbers, hold numbers, request numbers, and you can go here to find those quick overviews. That's at buckles.org/statistics.html, but you can just follow the My Buckles quick links to get there. Back to SimplyReports. Who here, and we won't make it a poll, but if you just want to start chatting, who here has used SimplyReports before? Who hates it? Who loves it? Give me a little feedback, just so I know who's... I know you've never touched it, Margaret. Ooh, not a fan. Reading, okay. Okay, it's a good mix of people, which is very good. So here, now that we've logged in as Tenafly, here is the main SimplyReports page. And a lot of people are intimidated by the amount of options they're just hit with right away. It's just lists upon lists, and you know it's hard to jump into, but not. So to begin with, actually, some of these options up on the top here, you're not going to be dealing with. You guys are, let's see if this works, not admin, so you're not going to need to worry about that world. And then we don't do serials, we don't do acquisitions, and you don't even need to know what that means. All you need to know is that you won't be dealing with pretty much any of this stuff here. And yes, and today in this session, being the more basic session, we'll largely be sticking to the item reports. And that's where the bread and butter of SimplyReports is for a lot of people. Oops, my pen works. Items. Now, each SimplyReports tab is broken down more or less the same way. You'll see 3 subtabs. You will see, in this case, item list, or if it was in the patron report, you'd see patron list, item count, and item statistical reports. Now, this latter one, we're only going to get to at the very end because it's a completely different world, but the first 2 are very similar. And let's jump in. Each SimplyReport form is sort of broken up into 2 areas. Up top here, we have the columns that you're going to select. And on the bottom, we have filters. So essentially, if we were to just pick one column, let's say item barcode, and not put in any filters whatsoever, it's going to provide us with the item barcode for, I don't want to crash anything, but I might crash something. Actually, it tops out, if you go here, you'll see it tops out at 300,000, but it would attempt to provide us with every item barcode in Buckles because we haven't filtered it down and we haven't provided any other columns for it to spit out. So let's start with some basic columns, and then we'll work our way down through some of the basic item filters, and then we'll dig a little further into it. Okay, so I'm going to select item barcode. I'm going to leave that as is, And you'll notice as I scroll down here, there's pretty much anything you could want to know about an item you can sort of find here in the columns. One thing to note is that things like the title of the item or the publication date isn't really a property of the item. For those of you who do linking, you're linking to a bib record, and the bib record, that's where that information is. But when we are in item list reports and item count reports, we can display that title information, that bibliographic information, and most of that is under the MARC heading. And actually, for those of you unfamiliar, MARC stands for Machine Readable Cataloging Standards, well, Machine Readable Cataloging, and it's a thing that's used for bibliographic metadata, and then I'll leave it at that. So what we want real quick is, let's do MARC title, just so we see the title of each item and the barcode. And while we're here, I want to sort of highlight how you go about selecting things. First, in the columns. In the columns, you simply click on whichever option you want. If I want to get the item assigned branch, for instance, I click on item assigned branch and shoot it over here. And these arrows over here would determine how you resort this column in the middle. Is anyone already confused, by the way? Should I slow down more, or just give me some feedback as we go along? So I'm going to take the item assigned branch and shoot it to the top. So this will cause it to be the column all the way to the left. If we want to get rid of item assigned branch, we have to hit the arrow key to the left.
All right, Mike, we do have one. Yep. Very confused.
Okay, so I'm going to run some very basic reports just to get us started, just so you get the gist of what SimplyReports is doing. I do want to point out one thing real quick here. When you're removing, so this middle column here, well, actually, this column on the left is all the possible columns that you'll see when you run the report. So you'll run the report and you'll get this, essentially a spreadsheet of things. And you can pick from possible columns here and move them over to what you're actually using, which is here. And further to the right, if you want to sort them, it'll go there. And I'll show you that right now. But sorting. So let's run a very basic report, and I'll sort of highlight the sorting and the column order and all that right now. So right now, we have selected for a given list of items to spit out the title and the barcode. And actually, let's add one more. Let's go with the call number. Now, the order in which it appears here determines the order in which it will appear left to right when you create the report. So let's say we want barcode first. Okay. Now I'm just going to run this, and as before, it's going to try to spit out a list for, and this is probably actually going to go slow, but let's see. I'm going to limit it just a bit more. Let's do 100,000.
And Mike, as you do this, how many columns can you create in a report?
I don't want to say it's unlimited, but you can go kind of wild with it. So we
Is
just
it
ran this.
basically going to be restricted by the width of your?
Yes and no. So essentially, we just ran this report, and it opened a new window, and you'll see we have the item barcode, the title, and the call number in the order that we put it in back over here. Now, you'll notice it says preview limited to 100 rows. There were 100,000 results. Because again, this is pulling data from every single item in somewhat no particular order at the moment in the Buckles catalog, in the database. What you would need to see the full results is the first option when you're when you see the report preview, which is download the report. And when you download the report, you're essentially opening up an Excel spreadsheet of all the results. And even if you have a lot of columns and it gets sort of chopped off when you have the preview, you're going to see all your columns that you selected when you download and open that spreadsheet. And I'm going to highlight this a bit more later. First, let's get back to selecting your columns. So I'm going to close this. And one thing, as I was mentioning before, is they weren't sorted. Like, what do I mean by sorted? Well, if I select a criteria for sorting, let's go with item call number. And now we have a criteria for sorting. Let's look at what the results seem to be. And this might take a bit longer because it's sorting. In fact, I might want to go back and limit that to a specific library just so we get some results. So I'm going to highlight this in a moment, but I'm just going to limit to the Allendale library, assigned branch Allendale, and rerun this. You should be careful about running really large reports because it can glitch up the system just a little bit. Oh, and now it's trying to do everything I just requested. There we go. All right, let's try that again. We reloaded the page. I'm going to limit to Allendale, and we're going to select those things that we selected before. So I'm going to select, I want to see the title of an item. Mark title. Oh, and quick, that is correct, Kim. The middle column sorts the order of the columns, and then the last column sorts the rows, essentially. So a quick tip here, since there's so many output columns to choose from, if you click once anywhere here, and you know the exact name of the column you want, you can quickly start typing it. So if I start typing Mark Author, I can jump to it real quick and then click that button.
So, Mike, in order to do that, in order to use that autofill, basically an autofill feature, I have to have highlighted that one of those options first.
Yes, you need to click into the box so it knows you're in this drop down or in this list of things. And then sometimes it can be a little quirky, but once you get used to it, you click in and you start typing something, and at least, even if you type the first couple letters, you'll at least jump to the area where you want to look for the column you want. And as you use this more, you'll start to learn the different columns you want to quickly jump to. So we have Mark title, and let's go back to item barcode, and then item call number. And we are going to, now we have this limited to Allendale at the moment. I'm going to highlight the filters in a moment. I am going to order it by item call number. I'm going to sort the rows by call number. And what we'll see here is the first 100 results. And actually, we're getting, let's see, a lot of nonfiction because since we didn't limit it to any sort of collection or anything else, we have a bunch of call numbers that begin with 0 and just a few periodicals with no call number at all. And it does see null or an empty call number field as, it has that start first. Any questions on this so far? How to sort things, how to add columns? And as we get into how to filter reports and what you might use this for, you'll sort of start to get why we would pick certain columns and how we generate reports for different things. So let's go, and we're going to leave these 3 columns, and we're going to keep it sorted by call number, and we are going to go down this list of filters. So one thing I do want to point out when it comes to all of these variables and SimplyReports in general is SimplyReports will display information to you that is recorded in the item record. It doesn't do individual transactions so much, with some exception, which I'll highlight later, but it's things that are stored in the item record. So the material type, the collection, as you'll see down here, fine codes, things you're used to seeing if you're linking or if you've ever modified an item record. Now, how is that useful? Well, one of the more useful columns, in addition to all that actually is something that's recorded in each and every item record, is the item circ statistics. And they're broken up three different ways. The item year-to-date circ count, you have the item previous year-to-date circ count, and the item lifetime circ count. And actually, if we jump over to Leap and we open up a item record, you'll see under statistics that it is recorded. It's not recalculated on the fly, but it's actually recorded in the item record itself, and that's why we can display it in SimplyReports and use it for whether it be weeding or collection development and our reporting needs. Without this particular column, SimplyReports would, I don't want to say it would be useless, but you'd be getting a lot less out of it, because this is one of the key numbers obviously you all want to know in terms of looking at your collections. Going back to the filters, the primary filter you're going to be concerned with selecting every time is your assigned branch. And same as above, you can start typing real quick and you can jump down to the selection of your choice. So I'm going to pick on Tenafly. I'm logged in as Tenafly. And if you happen to be a library, let's go to Montclair, with a multi-branch system, we have Montclair Public and Bellevue Avenue. It will select both branches automatically, but if you only cared about one collection, you could select one or the other. If you're the collection development person at Bellevue branch in Montclair, you might only be concerned with this specific branch of your library system, but most of our libraries only have one branch, and I think in a lot of cases, a lot of multi-branch libraries like to run these reports on both branches at the same time. So let's go back to Tenafly. One thing I'll point out now is that there is a way to multi-select various columns that do support it in SimplyReports. And for those who may be used to these kind of things on web pages and so forth, it works very much the same. You can select and deselect individual things by holding down the Control button. So on the lower left-hand side of your keyboard, you hold down Control, and I can deselect Rutherford, and now nothing is selected. Or I can select Roseland and Saddlebrook, and you'll see that start to populate here. You can also select a range of things. So let's say I wanted to pick Ramsey to Richfield. Now I could just do 1, 2, 3, but if I hold down the Shift button, select my first library, and then go to my last library, it'll highlight that whole range. Now, one thing I would advise against, unless you're very patient and you don't mind it probably crashing. For those of you who might be familiar with these type of lists, you can hit Control-A to select all. That will normally, 9 times out of 10, crash SimplyReports. Because there's so many libraries in Buckles, and by selecting each individual one, each individual library is also trying to generate a list of branches, so it'll stall out heavily. If you do need to select, if you're curious about what your neighbors are doing, if you want to run some sort of comparison, whatever, I would recommend highlighting smaller ranges of libraries a little bit at a time. There's minute reasons we may get into later where you may want to select nearly every library but yours, but it's real tricky to do without SimplyReports crashing because it's a bit heavy for it to process. But for now, we're just going to stick to a single library and not get ourselves confused. Tenafly. So now, if I ran this, again, just a list of every title of every item, assigned to Tenafly along with its barcode and item call number. Now, we can whittle this down further if we want to select collection. So to activate these boxes on the right, you need to select these check boxes. And we can just take a look at, actually, let's take a look at, if you're a children's librarian, you may be concerned with juvenile fiction. Yes, Peggy asks, so the filters relate directly to the item record? Question mark. Yes, each filter is a property with limited exception, is a property of something on the item record or item records. Just like before, we can also select ranges too. So let's say we don't want just juvenile fiction. We want all juvenile print, more or less. So we don't want media. So I can hit Control and select juvenile fiction and juvenile nonfiction. Now if we rerun this, we should start seeing a lot of J's or board books, BBs, in our call numbers as we scroll down. Now again, this is only the first 100. And this might be a good time to quickly show you what the full thing looks like. So if you go to Download Report, if you click this checkbox here, you'll get an option to click Download. And this will vary depending on the browser you're using. But in this case, I'm using Chrome, and it downloaded this item lists.xls, or it's an Excel file, to my computer. You'll note that if you go back here, you get to pick whether you want it to be a text file or an Excel file. By default, it's an Excel file, but not really, and I'm going to show you why in a moment. If I open this up, and I do have Excel on this computer, you might have OpenOffice or something else, it'll post a warning. And obviously, you need to have a spreadsheet reader on your computer or bring it into Google Docs or what have you. It's not really an Excel file, though. It's really just I don't know if anybody knows what a CSV is, but it's a list that's sort of not formatted properly for Microsoft or Excel. So it's going to give you this warning. Don't worry about it. You just hit yes. And you'll notice these things aren't formatted. It's just everything's squeezed together. It's not very pretty. So if you happen to be using Excel, you can drag out these so you can kind of see everything. And you'll always have that annoying issue of it truncating the barcodes. So real quick, and I'm going to cover this again, a lot more of this in the advanced course. You can go to Format. You want to make it a number, no decimal places, and then you'll start seeing the actual barcodes. And this, as you see, is where we're getting the results, the full results displayed to us. 25,517 juvenile print items at Tenafly, ordered by the call number. So I'm going to close this, and I'm actually going to show you the other parameters here for the report too. We're going to go over this probably later or in the advanced course, depending on how much time we have. But you can say, if you run a report, you can save it to run it again. There are some limited exceptions in terms of how much you can edit it, and you also don't get a preview, which is annoying. But just be aware that there is a way to save it. And then a very powerful feature of SimplyReports is the ability to create a record set right from the report you ran. Now I'm going to do this. I'm actually going to go run a shorter report and then highlight what that looks like. So as I go down the filters, so we already have it limited to juvenile fiction and juvenile nonfiction. Now I would note that there is a not present button. And despite what you should be doing, it is possible in Polaris to pick a null collection or a collection of none. If many of you may know this already, but if you go to a drop down and you go to pick collection, it is possible to pick none. You shouldn't, but there's some stragglers that wind up showing up in everybody's collection every now and then that need to be corrected. So, and actually a good way to catch those would be to run a SimplyReports report and simply select not present to find those without a collection. Yes, you can certainly, when you're generating report on SimplyReports, you can sort the columns after the fact by opening it up in Excel or whatever program you're using. But you certainly can do it beforehand to a somewhat more limited degree, but in SimplyReports itself up here. So I want to whittle this down a bit further. So we're not going to go over every single option on the list, but home branch is something we don't really use too much. You can leave that alone. Material type is a biggie. So let's say we just want to look at those board books. Actually, no, we've already seen the board books. Let's go with juvenile hardcover. Sure, why not? We'll get a much shorter list when it comes to that. And before I run this, I just want to point out the record status. Now, record status, 9 times out of 10, you should want to click record status and final. In most cases, particularly if you're just looking at available items and checked out items, all the records you're seeing are going to be final. There are certain situations where certain item records could have been purged or deleted. Normally, they should be withdrawn as well. But if you happen to manually delete an item record, let's say you accidentally linked something twice or accidentally, it could show up under deleted for a month before it purges from the system. So it's a good idea just to select final for most of your reports, unless you're specifically looking for a deleted item. So just know that it's a good thing to do by default. So let's run this report, which should be much shorter now. 14,912 items. I want this even shorter, actually. I'm going to go back and scroll further down our list. Now we can limit by shelf location, which I would point out can be a little confusing because if you have multiple libraries selected, you're going to see repeats of some of these shelf locations. Same thing for stat code. Technically speaking, in Polaris, the system is capable of having different shelf locations for different libraries, but that's not what we do in Buckles because it gets very confusing and it's very bad for consistency and reporting and whatnot. So just be aware that if you have multiple libraries selected, you might see multiple things selected here.
Hey, Mike, can you just explain what provisional is?
I almost don't want to because that gets a little bit beyond this training. But provisional is essentially if there's a conflict when creating an item record or a bibliographic record, there's situations where it'll be provisionally added. And you generally won't encounter that in your normal day-to-day circulation or linking and so forth. So it's not one thing to really be worried about. 99.9% of the time, everything is going to be final. And you just want to avoid accidentally catching those deleted ones if you're running certain reports.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. So we have shelf location. So if you wanted just new stuff, in fact, let's run that real quick. Let's see what we have that might be on the new shelf that is juvenile hardcover and, juvenile fiction. And in some cases, some of these things can be a little redundant. You would assume that anything that's juvenile hardcover would be in one of the juvenile collections, but you never know. Sometimes things get mislinked. Sometimes there can be disparity between a material type and a collection. So let's run this real quick. And that is a much shorter list. We have 278 results. And these are all new items on Tenafly's shelf. I'm going to add one more, and then I'm going to generate a record set. Circ status. This is a big one. And also one where you're often going to want to select multiple things, depending on what you're after. But in this case, I just want to see what's currently checked out. So I'm just going to, by itself, select checked out and run this report, this specific report, one last time. And I actually don't remember what the number was before. It was...
I believe it was 278.
Thank you, Joseph.
You're welcome.
So now that we have this nice and short, and let's say we actually care about this and we want to save this information for later, we can create an item record set and have that appear right away within Leap. In fact, now, because there's more ways to utilize record sets in pulling, when running searches in Leap, there's even better synergy between Leap and SimplyReports when it comes to playing around with record sets. So I'm just going to, A, take a glass of water, and B, jump into...
Mike, is there a default for circ status? So Linda was asking what the default is for the circ status.
In SimplyReports, if that's what you mean, there wouldn't be one selected by default. Is that what you mean in terms of when you're the form for SimplyReports?
Linda, is that basically what we were asking for within this form? Oh, you don't have to select circ status. That was one of the options that he was using in order to kind of whittle down this list. There was another parameter that he chose.
You very often would want to select circ status. When running certain reports, You may not care about things that are lost, for instance, because you want things that are on your shelf or damaged, or you might want just available or checked out. Just be aware that if you deselect it, it's no longer active. But if you select it again and don't actually want checked out, make sure you do go in and remove it. So I'm going to stick with checked out. And all I need to do to generate a record set, which will be visible to Tenafly, is give it a name. So I'm just going to go with TNF. It's good to start it with an abbreviation just to keep things nice and orderly. It's not necessary, but I believe there's still a glitch going on where you'll see other people's record sets. Until that's fixed, it's very helpful to prefix your record sets. So I'm going to put TENF. What am I going to call this? New juvenile stuff. Now, I am not going to save it just yet, because I just want to try to search for it first real quick. So we're going to do a record set search by name. I'm going to put that in, and I'm obviously not going to find anything. If I just did that, I might find something. Maybe not. Let's see. There we go. A whole bunch of record sets throughout the consortium, because you're only supposed to see your record sets. That used to be the case, but there's a bug in the system that hasn't been ironed out yet. So you're kind of seeing everything. So that's why, again, it's good to prefix things. And so here we clearly see this record set doesn't exist yet. If we go in, I'm going to add a quick note to hello, and then hit save, record set, and now search for it again. Here we have the newly generated record set in Leap. I'll open it up, and within Leap we have all our checked out items that are new juvenile fiction and nonfiction. Any questions so far? Am I going too slow for some people? I know for some of you who've used this already, this might be still kind of bare bones, but I just want to make sure everyone's following so far. It gets more interesting once we kind of cover the basics.
Well, we do have a question from Sharon, and I'm not really sure I understand it, so maybe you can shed some light on it. If you save report parameters, will they update automatically? And she's thinking about using it for weeding.
So you can save a report and rerun it. It is possible. You do need to be careful about the criteria you pick, particularly when you get to the dates, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. But it is possible to rerun a report, and we're definitely not going to get to it today. But in the advanced course, we'll show you how to actually schedule reports as well. Okay, great.
Oh, we just got a couple more questions. So one is, what is the purpose of the note? So you created that record set and you added a note to it. What is the purpose of that note?
Oh, that note. Okay. Basically, obviously, there's certain title limits and name limits for record sets. So this would basically be if one staff member makes a record set and wants to sort of inform the other staff members a little more about what the record set is all about, they can add a description there. It's not a necessary column at all. In fact, we can get rid of it and hit save. It just definitely needs a name and, an owner and so forth.
And somebody asked if you could demonstrate a weeding report.
I am 100% going to get into that.
Excellent. Thank you.
And in fact, I'm probably going to speed things along just a little bit because we have a lot to cover. So anyway, we've made a record set, and boom, now it's in Leap. And the results. And so those are the three things you can do once you've generated a report. You can look at the preview. You get the first 100 results. You can download the report, have a spreadsheet of it, and you can save it for later use, which maybe I'll show you real quick later. Jumping back in, now that I've highlighted the fact that we can save a record set, I'm also going to note real quick, and maybe you noticed I skipped over it in the beginning, you can actually pull in a record set into SimplyReports as well. So if I go to this drop-down list, and I think these might be specifically Tenafly record sets. If you have a pre-existing record set and you want to whittle it down further, let's say you made a record set of new items or a special collection, and you want to run a report based on that collection, that record set you made in Leap. You can load that record set. Let's look for the one we just made. Well, that would be kind of redundant though too, but let's pick a different one. Tenafly oversized books. So now, let's say we cleared all the other filters, even if we cleared the assigned branch, if we ran this, we would get the mark title, item barcode, and item call number of everything in this record set, but then can proceed to whittle it down further. So if you have a really big record set that you want to whittle down to, let's say you have all new juvenile fiction, and you want to whittle it down to board books. So you have the record set already. Well, let's say it's a special collection, a special topic, but you want to whittle it down to the board books. You can load your record set, add additional filters, and then save a new, smaller record set. So, and maybe we'll do a little bit of this record set stuff a little later on. But so no, you can pull in record sets. So now, those are the basic criteria you can filter by. I'm going to deselect circ status. In fact, just so I don't forget, I'm going to deselect checkout. I'm going to deselect shelf location. I'm going to keep this as final. And let's go to a different, I'm going to deselect material type as well. And I'm going to go to a different collection. I'm going to go to adult media. I like media. Someone was asking about a weeding report, and there's two different areas where you might go to filter by certain criteria. In fact, let's do one real quick, just so we can get to something fun. So, in addition to the mark title and item barcode and item call number, I want to pull out the search stats on it, on each individual item. So I'm going to go to the item year-to-date search count, and I'm going to go to, I'm going to pull out all of them. Item previous year-to-date, previous year, I should say, and then item lifetime. Okay. Now, if we run this real quick, and mind you, it's still sorting it by the call number, we'll see all those circ numbers for these items, which are now the media collection. You'll see, obviously, a lot of them year-to-date, given, CDs aren't quite as popular as they used to be, and, it's also a pandemic. The numbers are a little low, but... we have a question. Can you add to an existing record set? You can't do that from within SimplyReports, unfortunately. You would have to pull a new record set into Leap and then do the merger that way. Okay.
Mike, there was also a question. Can you edit a record from SimplyReports, or can you only read them? So this is just to create reports based on existing records. Is that correct?
Yeah, existing SimplyReports is only generating outputs, so you can't edit an item record. Nor can you edit a record set. You can pull in the data and you can spit it back out again. The only creation you're really doing is of the spreadsheets and of the record sets.
Gotcha. Is it possible to include the item ISBN UPC in the weeding report?
You absolutely can. In fact, let's add that real quick. And now, see, ISBN and UPC is a property of the bibliographic record, the MARC record. So if we go to MARC, we'll find that there, because your individual items don't have UPCs or ISBNs, but the bib records you're linking them to do. So let's spit that out as well. I'm going to go ISBN, and this is already getting a little long, but let's get rid of barcode as well. We don't need the barcode. Let's go title, ISBN, and we'll leave the call number for now. And I'm actually going to get rid of year to date, just to make this a little shorter. Let's see how well these items did this past year and for their lifetime. I'll run this real quick before perhaps resorting this. And here is that information here. Now, if you're curious about what's doing well in your collection or poorly, we can actually come in here. We can go to item previous year circ count and sort it by that first. Sometimes takes a little bit. We now have our media collection sorted by what was the top previous year circing items for Channelfly in this case. So this is a real good way to see what is hot at your library. Again, these criteria, the previous year circ, item lifetime, whatever, that's kind of the bread and butter of a lot of what you're going to do in SimplyReports. Let's actually jump back. Out of curiosity, let's check. Oh, you know what? I take that back. I want to actually see. I'm curious how this year is looking. I'm going to add the year to date instead of doing previous. And I'm actually going to get rid of call number for now. Okay. Interesting. So, clearly, these are newer items, because the previous year circ is so low, but lifetime and item lifetime, item year to date and item lifetime are very similar. New movies, and do take note. These are individual items, not titles. So you will see repeats, particularly if we were to order this by call number or the title. If you wanted to group them together, that's something we'll get to in a little bit.
So there are a couple other requests. Can you show the reading by classification number?
Yes, we certainly can. We'll get to that in just a little bit. I'm going to tackle the in-house circ versus total circ. I'm actually not to doubt you, but in-house circ is a very specific thing that only some libraries utilize. What's meant by in-house circ, for those who don't know, is there's a function within Leap to, and I don't know if this is actually what you're talking about, Carol, but or B Carol, but within Leap and Polaris in general, there's a feature where you can in-house check-in items that were left around the library to track in-house use. Things that weren't checked out by a patron but read by a patron. A lot of libraries don't utilize that. Some do. For those who do, you can absolutely generate a report based on that. The other potential interpretation of in-house circ for some would be things that are circing to your patrons. And that gets a little hairier when it comes to SimplyReports. You can certainly see what's checked out currently to your patrons. You can't actually break down the yearly circ or the lifetime circ to just your patrons, or you really can't filter that amount because that would get into looking at each individual transaction, and that is sort of a limitation of SimplyReports. Okay, let's push on ahead so we can get to some fun stuff. So let's see. We're going to stick with media for now. I'll keep these two criteria here. The year, yeah, I'm going to keep these two criteria here. And we're going to scroll down to the date filters. Now, you might note there is 3, my pen's still working, separate section for date, which could be potentially very confusing. But there's very good reason for this, and let me break down what each does. So item date filters, the first one, you're providing a specific range. First available date, if you're just looking to filter by newer items, you between a specific date, let's say between, let's say if you were curious about things that were added before the pandemic, so you could do, but this year, so you could do, January 1st to, I don't know, April 1st, depending on when you close and whatnot. And this can be very useful, but the other two date options tend to be more practical in use, and I'll show you why. The other two, and you see the description here, between two dates and prior to a specific date. If we go back here and go back to first available, we can have, let's do 1 month. So now, rather than having to pick a specific date, we'll have things that were first available within the last month. So new items in the last month. The reverse of that can be done with the third section here, which is before, for instance, let's go to first available date, is more than 1 month before the report run date. So anything older than a month, whether it be 2 months or 5 years, will be fed into this report and filtered down to. This actually becomes very important later on when you learn how to save and rerun a report. Because if you're looking for a report on new items, for instance, if we go back here and we just want to run some sort of report based on things linked within the last month, and we want to rerun that report on demand, or perhaps even on a schedule, we do not want to pick a specific date range, because it's always going to pick that same date range. It's not going to magically push it forward and so forth. So you really do want to use these relative date filters a large majority of the time. Everyone kind of get the way that works? So the question, should reading report be based on circ count rather than by date? A reading report could be based on a lot of things. You can certainly see the lesser circing items within a specific collection. But then you can also generate other columns. Let's do a quick one right here. Let's look at older DVDs. So we're still in media, we're still in Tenafly. Let's just keep it simple. Let's look at DVDs. And let's specifically look at older DVDs. So let's go back. For those of you who, and it'll vary from library to library how far back you want to go. Back in the days of Collection HQ, for those of you who remember that, it would sort of restrict things to very narrow guidelines, like 3 years or something like that. Whereas in SimplyReports, you can kind of cater it to however you want to steer your reading report. So let's do first available date more than 3 years ago. Okay. I would note that there's a creation date and a first available date. For those of you who don't get this distinction, you may have pre-linked the item. So you created the item record, you linked it, but until you check it in so it's available to patrons, let's say you got it in early from Baker and Taylor, if they even do that anymore. I think they do, yeah. Those 2 dates will be slightly different in many cases, unless you happen to receive the item and link it and everything the same day as the release date. So let's go with 3 years. And I think we're going to leave everything alone for now. But we're going to skip a couple of these just so we can jump down to item circulation filters. And this is also a very powerful area between these two for a reading report. So let's say we want, well, you know what? Let's see what the numbers are already, and then we can whittle it down a little further. So we have the previous year today. Let's do, yeah, let's keep it the way it is. Well, let's do previous year, because previous year might be more relevant in some cases. So clearly, DVDs, they circ a lot. So we want to see something that didn't circ much at all last year. So let's go down here. Well, actually, we can't do last year from this filter, but so maybe we will do year to date. So let's do less than 2. And I'm actually going to resort this to year to date. And now we'll have a list of DVDs that this year have only circed twice or less. And this is still a lot of items. So let's whittle it down a bit more. And this might be an area where you might want to also adjust the search status too. You might only care about things that are available, because if it got checked out recently, or if it's currently checked out, you don't want to weed it. So we can limit it to, we can simply limit it to available, perhaps. So let's do that and just rerun that and see what that looks like. 3,935. Let's go less than 1, and let's push this back a little further, 5 years. And we can also add a lifetime to this, but let's just look at our results so far. Still a lot, you know. I mean, let's see. Previous year. Yeah, this year is like not a great thing to go by on many accounts. So, and since you can't limit by previous year to date in the filters, this might be an area where you may want to generate the report. And then if you have that previous year to date in the output column in your spreadsheet, you can sort in your spreadsheet and then filter as necessary. That's a little more, I don't want to say advanced, but you know, taking us outside of SimplyReports, which we're not going to be doing today. So let's limit by lifetime. We want the things that even across the lifetime of this item has not circulated much. So let's go with 10. Let's try that. Now this is getting a lot shorter. These 89 items didn't circ much at all this year, and lifetime they only circ 10. Let's do a little bit loud. Let's go 4, 5, 5, and I'm actually going to resort it by previous year. So this had, you might consider this to be a pretty good previous year, but depending what the item is. But as we come down further, you'll see that the previous year's circ count is null for a lot of these items. So it's a 0 for the item year to date and previous year to date, which means it has not circulated in this year or last year. So now you're starting to build a possible criteria for weeding some of these items. Now, let's veer away from these DVDs, and I'm going to jump into adult nonfiction. And let's see. I'm going to release some of this criteria for a little bit and just generate what we can do. We can attack this from a different angle. And in the item relative date filters, we can select, where is it? Last checkout or renew date, more than. So what hasn't gotten checked out in over 3 years? Now, right now, this is all of adult nonfiction. So nonfiction, that's going to be a lot of things. But we can whittle this down further. And one of the other ways we could whittle it down is someone was talking about call number. So let's go to item call number filters. Now, a thing to note about the item call number filters is they're not very forgiving. If you'll notice, they're broken down by specific call number field. You can't just search the general call number. So it SimplyReports does sort of demand that your collection be really consistent in terms of where you put things. Now, you know, your Dewey should be, you know, in some cases, or most cases, should be in your class. So let's what should we search? Let's look up cookbooks. Let's see. So, and the way this works is via a range. So we're going to do 6, 4, 1, 5, and then 6, 4, 1, 5, 9, repeating. You don't have to put that many nines, but you get the point. And let's see what that is looking like. And again, we're still we're going to our cookbooks based on the class, and the based on the class. We're not, you know, we have adult nonfiction selected. We're not going to get all those YA cookbooks. And what was the other criteria? and hasn't been checked out in more than 3 years. We're going to run that. And good list of things. Now, nonfiction isn't the hottest items in the world. So if you were reading nonfiction, you'd want to whittle this down a lot further. Any questions on how these Dewey range, these call number ranges work? And yeah, call numbers can be very tricky. Your world kind of needs to be in order. If you're running into issues, Leap is a little more forgiving, because if some of your call numbers, some of the components of your call number, if they're in the wrong field, you can bring those up in Leap. But it is good to have all those consistent, particularly if there's ever a need for like bulk changing some of those fields, if you're changing your prefixes around, or stuff like that. But everyone's getting how the ranges are working. I believe. Let's see. And I've checked Tenafly. Most of their stuff is in order, but in certain cases you might get a Dewey in a cutter, because some libraries have juvenile, DVD, nonfiction, and they might choose to break it down that way. And you will need to hit this checkbox next to every criteria you choose to activate. And if you activate it, you can't leave it blank, or it's not going to generate results. You can go with not present as well. So we're not going to, I don't know how much we're going to get in cookbooks, but if we wanted to go with, if we want to exclude, if I do this and get rid of collection, I don't know what's going to happen here. Let's see. There we go. One juvenile, potentially, cookbook. Last activity date. That is one you may care about, but you need to sort of pick between last checkout or renew date and last activity. Last activity could be the last time it was checked out. If it was, I think, inventoried, might be counted under activity as well. So for circulation, you want to know when it last actually went out. You may wish to stick with last checkout or renew date, or not. Certainly, any of these criteria, if you're curious about things that haven't gone out on loan in a long while, you can limit by in transit dates and so forth. Okay, I'm going to just rush through some of the rest of these filters, and then we'll get into some requests, I think, and some other general questions. So we went through call number. I'm just going to deselect some of this here. We went through the dates. Item checkbox filters. This seems daunting, but most of these are not relevant. Oh, quick question. What was cutter again? Cutter is, it's the component of a call number that you generally would put. So if you had a Dewey here and then the author or the author initials might be here. I mean, it depending on if you're going with strict Dewey standards or you're doing your own thing, depending on the collection. It might vary from library to library, depending on not so much fiction and nonfiction and your standard had things there, but for other things like media, you could be a little flexible. So these checkboxes, they correspond to all the various checkboxes that are in your item record. If you're linking or just going to the item record. Most of these, not super relevant. Most things will display in the pack unless they're, whatever. Most things should have a call number. The ones you might mainly care about are whether they're holdable or not. So if they're high demand items that you don't allow holds on, if you're doing, like if they're new items at your library and it's like one of those like lucky pick things, like if someone happens to be there, they can check it out for 3 days and no one's allowed to hold it. So you can run reports on those. So whether it's checked or not checked, maybe even more useful is patrons from this library and branch is not checked or checked. So if you want to run a report on things that you're holding, you're only allowing your patrons to pick up at your library currently, new items, you can select that. And let's see, I'm still on adult nonfiction. Oh, no, actually, no, I'm not. So let's just run this quick report here. And there's 42 items, Blu-rays, some new fiction, I'm sure. Maybe not new, I don't know, that Tenafly isn't releasing to other libraries currently. Any questions? Alrighty, moving on. We got the checkbox filters. Most people are not going to find the item record ID filters useful unless you, for some reason, know a specific range of record IDs. I mean, it's not even barcode, it's record IDs. So, bibliographic record filters. These are kind of interesting because, obviously not everything is in your actual item record. Things like, as we mentioned earlier, the publication year. But we can target specific items based on the bib records they're linked to a little bit. So mark publication year. So let's say we want to see anything that was, well, let's just stick with 2001. And we'll just go with everything for the moment. Here we have a list of everything that, according to the bib record, was published in 2001. Regardless of when it was acquired, that's a different criteria that's on your item. But according to the bib and the mark information, all these items were published, if it's correct, in 2001. You can also, some of these can be less useful. There's something called primary type of item, which is a little bit like material type for items, but it's for bib records. We call them TOMs, type of material. So you can use this to whittle down something. 9 times out of 10, you might be better with your material types because you'll know exactly how you want to, link those certain collections based on your knowledge of your library. But this is certainly usable. Mark record language. This can be very useful, but just take note that occasionally the bib record, might have a certain language in there. Let's go to Chinese, or country of origin of, and all the various languages under that bracket, and run this report real quick. So clearly, this is limiting to bibliographic records with, that are tagged under the Chinese language. But in certain cases, let's see if I can find something. Little Pim, Fun with Languages. You might get educational materials on the Chinese language or certain other things that will make its way into a mark record that may not be exactly what you want if you're targeting just items that are completely written in Chinese for Chinese speakers or readers. Sometimes that'll be muddled in there. So in those cases, particularly if your library does stat codes for foreign language materials, you might want to base such a report on those. You can also use bibliographic record sets to filter down your item results. So if you happened... Now, our individual libraries use bibliographic record sets less often. The bib records are owned by the Buckles office, or the consortium as a whole, because all the cataloging is done at the Buckles office. But there are reasons that libraries make things for reading lists, and here we see high school 10th grade reading lists and so forth. A few that we've added that everyone can see. These are record sets that are generated automatically, although I should check up on them, make sure this is still working. We generated these Buckles single holding bibs that are auto-populated as a means of determining things where in your collection that you might be the last holder of. So you're the only one in Buckles that has this particular title, which might be a criteria for either wanting to keep it or definitely wanting to get rid of it. If you have a few classics and some repeats of different publications, let's say Mark Twain, whatever, that you want to whittle down, let's say you have a couple Huck Finns, and one happens to be linked to a bib record where you're the last holding copy, you may wish to weed that one. And that way, the Buckles office would, and our catalogers would love to be able to clean up some of those older bib records that, are taking up space, that, particularly if you need to weed something of that title anyway. Because, I'm not saying we hate single holding bibs, because they're certainly valuable. What happened to my screen? It refreshed. That was interesting. I need to start from scratch for some reason. But you can use that. There we go. That that threw me off. That bibliographic record filter to do those things. Any questions thus far? Any thoughts? We're kind of getting down to the list of filters, and then we're going to do a couple more things. Any specific weeding reports someone wants me to run? Anything? Shoot some ideas at me. I'll run through some things real quick. I know getting through all this is a little bit of a drag, but once you're there, you can kind of think of a bunch of ideas and generate a lot of reports. We'll probably go over a little bit too, so I'm going to try to cover the essentials as much within the next half hour. And then for those who want to stay a little bit, if you don't got somewhere to go, I'll stick around. So I'm going to repopulate this list a little bit too, since that got reset on me. It normally doesn't do that. It will time out after a period of time, SimplyReports, but normally not while you're using it. Yes, there's an advanced class next Tuesday that you can sign up for. If you got the email, I think there's a link to registration there. I might be on the Buckles events calendar, and we'll probably post a link at the end of this meeting as well. And we definitely have room. So advanced class, advanced class will be skipping over a lot of this minutia of all these different fields, so we can kind of jump straight into it. Patron tabs will be in advanced. We might even have to save item statistical for advanced too. I'll probably run through that real quick, but in advanced class, we'll be going over the patron reports, briefly the holds reports, and patron account. Quick, because they're very similar reports now that you get the idea of how to do an item list report. And then we'll be getting into how to schedule reports and save them. Thank you, Joseph. I'm out of water. Let's see. Did we have any suggestions for reports to run, or?
Yeah, Carrie was asking about running a report for T-Mobile users, but she couldn't find a carrier for output.
That's a good question, and that's for another day. But I'll look real quick, and that could very well be something. They haven't updated SimplyReports in a long time, so that could be a criteria that they have not added. Let's see. I haven't actually run a. Let's see. There's no drop down, so you can have a carrier present or not present. But yes, we will be doing something about those T-Mobile patrons soon, though. By the way, I'm planning on doing something in bulk and announcing it. We're just kind of behind schedule on that. Let's go back to items. Speaking of patrons, though, you can also whittle down items by patron, but it's limited again. So let's rebuild our criteria here. I'm just going to do mark title. Where are we here? Item call number. And we'll leave it at that for now. And let's do one item lifetime. Sure, why not? And I'm going to sort it by item lifetime. So if we scroll down here, we're limiting to Tenafly again. We're not going to limit it to any other criteria. I'm just going to do this whole final thing, because that is sometimes important. If we go to the if we go to the patron general filters, we can pick a patron branch. I'm going to pick Tenafly. Obviously, the majority of items are going to be Tenafly because these are Tenafly items. In fact, let's print out some patron info too. Nothing personal. Let's just do patron code just so we can see that as well. Oh, there it is. Adult, juvenile, adult, juvenile. Now, a thing to note about these patron filters. If I go down to, where is it? Search status and click on available, you see nada. The patron filters only apply to items where it's currently checked out to a patron. It's not last checkout. It's not in transit for. It's just that applies to checked out items. If I select checked out now, you'll see that same list returned to us. Can you show us the parameters of a waiting report for items more than 5 years old? Absolutely. Let's do that. And let's go to. So just to finish up though here, you can limit by patron branch, or if you wanted to see specifically juvenile patrons that currently have Tenafly juvenile patrons that currently have things checked out, you can run this report. And these are the items, and sorted by item lifetime. So in the history of all the present collections at the Tenafly library, these are the most popular that are currently checked out also to juvenile patrons from Tenafly. You could certainly mix patrons if you wanted to. Tenafly, let's see, Tenafly checks out to a lot of Englewood patrons, it's nearby. You could do Englewood, and then you would also get their patrons in the results. And we could certainly output which library. Let's see, patron, branch, abbreviation. This will still mostly be Tenafly. Let's see if we can catch a non-Tenafly. Oh, there's an Englewood right there.
There was one other question. Yes. Back here from Linda. How do you find items in your collection have notes on them in SimplyReports?
And I think we probably skipped over that because we're not quite done with all the filters yet. So let's go. I'm going to minimize this for the ease of that. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of the checked out criteria here, just so we can look at everything. Minimize that. I'm going to get rid of these patron restrictions. And just to finish off with patrons, there's also, you can do it by postal code based on patron, claims, and lost items the patron may currently have. Generally not so useful when it comes to collection management and so forth, but those are there if you need. Now, if we jump back up, we skipped over item block note and funding filters. The library assigned block is interesting because the library assigned blocks are one of those things that technically can be added, can be unique. Technically, in terms of within Polaris, they could be unique for each library, but they're not because we have synergy amongst our libraries and we've kept them consistent. But you will see these duplicates here. So in most cases, you're going to want to probably pick your library if it's a library assigned block, like something like C Note or something like that. But when it comes to a free text block, that if you've added one of those, obviously if you're filtering to something, it would be in a scenario where you've put very consistent notes on something. Like if you had, let's say you had a non-public note for blind date with the book. Some libraries do that, during Valentine's Day. They'll wrap them up in brown paper bags and so forth. But so if you had a bunch of things that had that specific note in it, this is how you would search that. I don't believe this takes booleans or rather wildcards, so they do need to be specific when you're searching up that note. But it can be a pretty powerful tool if you want to tag, use like non-public notes or public, or physical condition, which actually we might be co-opting soon for, in a different way. So maybe don't start doing physical condition stuff now unless you already are. But yeah, you could use a non-public note if it's something that shouldn't be blocked, or a free text block if you want that pop-up and you want, it to be halted. So a lot of things might have, a lot of DVDs might be 2-disc set, and you can certainly search those. In fact, let's see if Tenafly does that. Nope. Or I missed some other criteria. Let's see. Pardon me. But that's how you would search by a note. Moving on. I am going to move on, just so we don't miss it, to item count reports and what those are all about. I will take any last-minute suggestions for well, I didn't do the 5-year one for weeding, so let's do that real quick. So there's various ways you could do that, but let's go to item relative date filters. And if you want to find something that hasn't circled since 5 years, oh no, items more than 5 years old. Okay, so we're not talking about the publication date. We're talking about items that were either first available or created more than 5 years ago. So under this same date section, we can go to first available date more than 5 years ago. Now, there's some circumstances where I believe there might be some items, really, 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 really old items in the catalog that may have carried over from our last, don't quote me on this, but they may have carried over from our last ILS that might not have those first available dates in there, but they might have creation dates. Not sure about that one. I haven't thought about it in a while, but just be aware of that. That could be a thing that comes up. So let's just see what we have here. First available date more than 5 years ago, and let's limit it a little bit further. Let's go to item circulation filters, and let's say year-to-date circ is less than 10. And here we have 409 items. Let's get some more details on those items too. Let's go to item, actually, let's go to item first available date here. That way we can actually have the exact value, and we can actually sort by this. So if we do it this way and run this report, so here we have the first available date. So this is the newest of our items that are over 5 years. And then now there is no way to reverse sorting from within for the preview page from within SimplyReports. That would be nice. But once you once you download the report and open up the spreadsheet, of course you could do that in Excel or wherever else. Any other questions? Does everybody pretty much get how that would work for like a weeding report or, I mean, particularly this section when we're going item by item is, a lot of it is you're looking at what you might weed, or you're looking at, what items are your hottest and you need to order more of. Yes. So there is a way to save your search criteria, which we're going to cover in more detail in the advanced class. But under Save Report Parameters for Later Use, I'm just going to save one real quick for Tenafly here. Tenafly saved report. And I'll save it. I'll delete it later. And I'll show you this real quick, but we're not going to really get into any detail at all. But if you go to under My Reports, And you need to remember the type of report it was. So that was an item list report. And Tenafly has a bunch already. Let's see. It was an item list, wasn't it? Oh, yeah. Tenafly saved report. Here we have that saved report here. You can click on it. And down at the bottom, you can schedule it or you can run it. Be aware, though, that when you run it, you don't get that convenient little preview. It'll just, let me actually do it. It'll just tell you the report number, yada, yada, and you have to actually just download that spreadsheet. So if you're looking for a quick, like, top 10 or whatever with just a preview, you're not going to get it out of the saved report, but you can then just open up the spreadsheet. If you're going, let's go back in real quick. Again, covering this all in more detail in the advanced course. But if we go back to item list reports, you used to not be able to edit these, like way back when, but now you can click on it and then hit edit to modify the report, if it needs a little bit of tweaking. And again, it's for this reason I recommend those relative date filters rather than specific date ranges, because it kind of doesn't really work for rerunning a report easily. Okay, now, item count reports. What the heck are these? I'll say in brief, they're really good for a lot of reasons, but they're good, particularly good for judging the performance of a specific collection. Because what item count reports does is it groups together items by different criteria and gives you some sums and totals. So let's do a general performance report on the collections at Tenafly. So I'm going to output the item assigned collection name. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I'm going to, let's not keep on picking it. Let's go with, let's go Montclair. I'm just going to go Montclair, Maine, actually. And let's see. We're not going to filter it down by collection. We are going to go record status final. And I do want to only go with available, checked out, on hold shelf, en route, in transit. I don't want lost. I don't want missing, withdrawn. Depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want in storage or non-circulating as a, well, no, we're going to leave that off for now too. So if we just run this as is, only spitting out the item assigned collection name, let's see what we get. Here we have every, so here, just a quick example. Here we have some items that are a collection of none or a collection of null. They're probably older items that are, but by default, it'll always show you the number of items in that group. It groups everything together. So you'll always know for a given criteria what's the size of that sort of unit that you've grouped together. But what we want to do is we scroll down towards the bottom. We'll have some nifty things like sum, item lifetime cert count, year-to-date cert count, and so forth. So let's go to year-to-date cert count, and we'll sort it. We'll keep it sorted by collection name, just to keep that orderly, and hit run again. And here is the year-to-date performance of all the collections at Montclair, Maine, adult fiction, adult media, and you can kind of get your circ ratio, your number of items to total circs based on these two numbers and comparing them. Any questions thus far? I feel like we kind of sped up a lot. Everyone get the gist of how this grouping works. I'm going to show it off a little bit more. Let's break it down by different criteria. I am going to filter it by collection. I'm going to filter it by juvenile collection. So let's go with juvenile fiction. But what I want to do is, instead of outputting the assigned, actually I'm going to keep the assigned collection name. It'll be redundant, but that's fine. And I'm going to go with the item material type. I'm going to have it sort by those two same things. So now everything is juvenile fiction, but this is the circulation breakdown, the item year to date versus total number of items of the juvenile collection. Audiobooks, board books, early readers, graphic novels, hardcover, and so forth. And so it's a good way of sort of, if you want a general report on a specific collection. It's a little harder to do with nonfiction in terms of Dewey ranges and so forth. I mean, you can filter this down. So, for instance, let's go with adult nonfiction. You don't want to really group it by call number unless you have some pretty consistent call numbers, and maybe you can group it by a prefix. But you can certainly filter it. So, let's go with let's see. Let's go with history item. And you have all, largely all the same filters that you did in the item list. Now you're just grouping everything together. So if we go with, oops, that's not what I wanted. Let's see, 9. Let's go with U.S. or North American history. 970. I can't type. Now we don't want to output the call number. Well, we can, but we kind of just want to see. We're just whittling down this previous report, this nonfiction report, based on this. Now, most of this is going to be the same material type, so let's take a quick look. You have hardcover and trade paperback, but this is narrowed down to the 970s. If we did juvenile nonfiction as well. And let's spit out a call number. Actually, no, not a call number. Let's see. Item collection. Item assigned collection abbreviation. There we have that breakdown there of 970s in juvenile and in adult nonfiction. Any questions, any requests, any, I'm going to start to bring everything down to Q&A, and we'll see if, does everyone still find this terribly confusing or boring? Or are we all enlightened? Oh, good. It's a lot to get through it first, but once you see how everything works and plugs in together, it can be kind of fun to dive into. I'm gonna disappear myself again. So let's just jump back here. So just to recap real quick. We have our item list reports, which will give row by row for everything, and the item count reports, which are good for overall performance of a collection and so forth. There is also the item statistical reports, which we're getting on 2 hours, so I'm not going to jump into that fully now. But just be aware, item statistical reports are funny because you can, unlike the other reports, you can pick specific date ranges. So let's go to checkout and item assigned branch. And let's pick this past week. And I'm just showing you guys this real quick. Oop, I did that wrong. 10. Nope. That's right. Now, this will spit out some information. Let's go to a specific library, too. Let's stick with Allendale. It's nice and high on the list. Anytime you're running one of these, you're going to have to click Run Report Now, because they do warn that these can take longer to run. We have a pretty fast server, so it's not too big of a deal, but just do be careful when you're running the statistical reports, because if you give it too wide a criteria, if you're going too far back in time, you're loading too many things, it'll take a long while and might stall out on you. That's why there is a timeout that they set by default. But anyway, so I'm going to run this really quickly. So we checkouts in the last week by item assigned branch, which can be a very fun statistic. But be aware, the way we do circulation in Buckles, I shouldn't say the way we do circulation, but the way we look at it often, and it varies library to library, but normally when you see your circ report, your monthly circ report, that's based on your collection. That's the performance of your collection, not your location or your patrons. So you'll see here that in this report and in all of the item statistical reports, it's based on transaction location. So just be aware, if you jump in and start playing around with this now, we'll cover this more in the advanced class. It's not the same as your monthly circ number that you get from the Buckles office or from Buckles reports, because anything circing, in this case you can see the actual item branch, but this isn't going to be Allendale's total circulation of their collection, because obviously their collection has circulated in other libraries as well, and we've limited it to Allendale. Just be aware of the way that works, and it does have filters too, but they're kind of limited. So I find this less useful, but still pretty informative in regards to pulling certain stats. Anyway, any other questions? I think 2 hours is probably long enough for you guys, I imagine. Thank you guys too for joining us. Hope it wasn't too dry. It's kind of hard to. It's not too flashy when you're going through all these lists and drop downs. But the advanced class, thank you, Joseph, will be next Tuesday. There'll be minimal recap on this, almost none at all, except for the stuff we tackled a little later on. We'll be getting into pulling things into Excel a little bit more, scheduling things, and all those other report types that we did not get to. Quick question, not really related. I've seen some record sets from SimplyReports and deleted a few, but they still doesn't showing up in the record sets. How long till they're deleted? Record sets aren't deleted automatically, but if you've deleted them manually, I think they technically stick around in the system for a little bit. I don't think you should see them though, but yeah, you need to go through and delete old record sets. They don't expire. I don't know if I'm missing the question, but and yeah, thank you guys for showing up. And if you're coming to next week's class, feel free to come in with questions for different, more difficult reports that you would like to run that, maybe you're not sure if you can run them in SimplyReports. In certain cases, some reports, some data sets kind of require you to take stuff from SimplyReports, maybe toss it into Excel for a little bit, and then, organize data that way. Okay. Thank you all once again.